Yes, hello. Right, thank you. Lights, camera, action. Good morning, all of you. I hope you slept well. My job is just to really do the logistics, and you've all seen those several times over. There's no fire alarms expected, so if one goes off, follow in an orderly line and stand in the car park and get soaking wet. Obviously, no recording, no audio or video recording. Turn your mobile phones off, all of that stuff. Make sure you get your lunch tickets this morning if you want them. I think it's before 10:45. Buy your de-expedition raffle tickets. And perhaps most importantly, I've been asked to say if you are staying here and haven't checked out yet, then please do so immediately at the end of this presentation, if not before. Now, I have known Roger for a long time. And, and he hasn't changed. He has been passionate about islands for all of the time I've known Roger.
You were on the first HF committee meeting I went to with IOTA.
This is very probably true, yes. And I don't think he needs any introduction at all. If you want to know what he's really like, then Jill, his good lady, is sitting over there and she'll tell you if you treat her to a coffee or something. Roger, over to you.
Yes, fine. Thank you. Thank you, Don. Good morning, everyone. Glad to see you so early in the morning. You obviously didn't stay up too late last night. I am going to... Is it not working? Hello? Is that working better? Okay, fine. First, I'm going to give you a warm-up before we start, to get you in the mood. Fact or fiction? And some of these are of a personal nature. The RSGB is responsible for IOTA, fact or fiction. It was, until 3 years ago. Everything that is good about it is owed to the RSGB. Those things which you are not very happy about, they're owed to me, not the RSGB. Don't blame the RSGB. In fact, only on 2 occasions did the RSGB really have any problem with me in the sense of the structure of the program. Lots of other problems, but not in the sense of the structure of the program. And that was over 2 islands. Anglesey, they were pretty upset about Anglesey. And at a board meeting, it was mentioned, the question of Rockall came up and why it was on the list. Those are the only 2 things. They're not responsible, never been responsible for the strategy of the program, the structure of the program, the content of the program, who does it, or whatever. So if any plaudits have to be given, it's to be given to the RSGB. They did a very good job. In the last 3 years, we've been a limited company. Right, that's a fact. At my very first talk, no one turned up. Fact or fiction? Fact. Well, look, there was one elderly gentleman, this was about 30 years ago, an elderly gentleman who told me after a few minutes that he was there for the JOTA and not for the IOTA. You've probably seen my car outside with a registration mark. It's the yellow one. But did you know I have a vacuum cleaner which is named with the brand name IOTA? Fact or fiction? Fact. My motives were once challenged. Well, they've been challenged over the years, but there were once in particular and it was a quite reputable guy, you all know him, and very early on, wanting to get as many Frenchmen on uncomfortable rocks in freezing weather, in terrible conditions, with no propagation, as many as possible. Fact or fiction? Fact. I was asked at an event, what is 10 tar? Fact. 90% of the people in IOTA are outside the UK. Fact or fiction? Fact. There is an Indonesian young lady going around with the name of IOTA. Her father went on a de-expedition to a rare Indonesian group while his wife was expecting a baby. And the baby arrived while he was on the de-expedition. And he said, oh, that will be IOTA. She must be probably in her late teens or early 20s now. Fact? Yes. And the last of this little bit, I have a number of rather endearing names. I won't mention them because they might get into Twitter and so on. Of course, the one which I really like, is most endearing, is He Who Must Not Be Named. That has been heard, and that's fine. I'm rather fond of that one. Okay, right. You'll have to wait a bit. Anyway, here we are. Sorry, where are we? Little bit of patience. Story of vision. I think you all know that Jeff Watts was the architect of this program. He was, in fact, a shortwave listener, and the first few people in the program were in fact, shortwave listeners, and quite a lot of them at that time. And he was commemorated by being put on the CQ Hall of Fame when he finished with IOTA and the DX news sheet. And his period from 1964 to 1985, then we are going to do in this four areas, but the first two areas I'm covering today, the other two are more recent and they're probably familiar to you. The reason he did it, he saw DXCC basically as an American program, and he really wanted to give a challenge to other people that they can get on to onto islands near them and enjoy their day in the sun. And this was why he developed it. It was not based on political boundaries per se, but it involved mainly geographical, some would say a geopolitical kind of setup. And that was the way that his original vision, but it was his vision. And the content of it is basically large islands, Sri Lanka, Cyprus, Corsica, ones like that, recognized island groups. And I'll be repeating this. It's not a question of, I will not be repeating this. This is the only time you will hear it. But there are 1 million, plus or take another million, islands in the world. And you had to do something to corral them into 1,200 groups. At a very early meeting, the previous committee took the view that we would not be open-ended, that it would be, in fact, a closed program at 1,200 groups. And we would not go over that. I'll come back to that in a few minutes. But as I say, there was a minimal political dimension. As an example, Cuba, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, and Puerto Rico were all in one IOTA group. At the beginning, there were 500 groups. By the time he handed it over in 1985, there were about 560, with about 400 activated. The top score was about 338 F9 RM, and only about 172 certificates had been issued. So it was a small program, and this is the thing, it started from a small program, and we never knew that it was going to grow in that way. Jeff's method of operation was with stencils and a huge labor-intensive way of doing it. I think Roger LDI, are you here? Well, anyway, he used to visit and see everything which Jeff was doing, and he said it was all on stencils and so on. Right, 1985, RSGB, over to you. And the future. But what were we going to do with it? I was on the committee at the time. There was a chair of that committee who actually he's not here today, but he was in charge. He's at this convention today. And he was on record as saying, I don't think it was in the minutes, but he was on record as saying, it's another award, it's small, it's largely unknown, and it's unlikely to set the world alight. Therefore, let it go on, and if it dies, it dies. Now, the RSGB, or the committee as we were then, it was being run by the HF committee. They knew that there was a need for some changes to it. I'm not very enthusiastic, as I say, let's take it on, but do as little as possible. It will most likely die. HF's, and the view of the committee was, HF's focus is DXCC, not islands. And they said, any committee member looking round the table, any committee member interested in running with it? And I volunteered. But thereafter, strict instructions that IOTA would not be given more than 5 minutes discussion at any committee meeting. 5 minutes, it was up. And he would cut me off mid-sentence almost. It was very evident early on that there would be a need for restructuring it. We couldn't live with a situation where the people on these various islands in the Caribbean were all on one group, and we were going to have to change it away from at least recognizing the basics of the DXCC program as one of the key criterion. So it meant, in fact, a blend of political and geographic. And we also had to recognize something which was coming up, which were people who had an island just off their coast saying, well, why doesn't this count for IOTA? And there are an awful lot of those. And in the early days, there wasn't the kind of control which you might say there is today. It was basically, get your word in and see whether you can influence what comes out. As I say, resisting outside pressures, changes of all sorts. At 9 o'clock, after the day it was announced, I think it was actually on the day it was announced, that the RSGB were taking over the program, I was getting telephone calls. Germany, what are you going to do with IOTA, they said. And that basically was. And we realized that to be effective in the management, it could not be an open-ended program. Again, 1 million islands, how do you control that? How do you divide them up? It just wouldn't work. You had to have a closed program. Whoops. My thing has gone down my trouser leg, actually.
It's better than going up.
Well, are you still able to hear me? Well, it doesn't matter really, does it? This is going to be on YouTube, you know that.
This is where Roger drops his trousers. These videos.
Well, this has come off as well.
Keep the camera running.
There we are. There we are. Okay,
Right.
we're fine.
That's going in your pocket where it's safer.
Come on, put it on. Yes. I felt this thing going down my trouser leg, as you see what I mean.
I don't see the cabaret on here.
Sorry?
I don't see the cabaret on here.
Yes, okay. Yes. I've lost my place, of course, here. So there we are. Yes. Right. Okay. Yes. Yes. We passed a bit where it said the RSGB were not very well. The HF committee were not very enthusiastic. Yes. Right. We needed to construct a set of rules to define a valid group, IOTA group, and of course an island. There was, under Jeff's program, no list, no structure as to what an island was, and an island could be anything. You can't go on maps or atlases, because atlases and maps will vary between them. So what is an island in one place will be an islet in another, will be a reef in another, will be an atoll in another. They're not consistent. So we had to define it. And it had to be workable. And in a way, the whole of this structure had to respect, as far as we could, Jeff's original group and island selection. So there was a degree of looking at the rules and seeing how they would incorporate, as far as possible, some of Jeff's original islands. We had to take some off the list. Not everyone will agree this restructuring. There are many ways of doing it. We chose one, but there are probably 100 other ones. If any of you want to say that, why didn't you do it that way, fine. You obviously have given serious thought to it, and you are a candidate for coming on the management team. So anyone speak up who's interested in that. In the end, it evolved. It didn't immediately work that way, but over the years, after a lot of deep thought and kind of thinking at the early hours of the morning how we would do it, and judgment of what was best. But, you know, it's human nature. Guys are really only interested in how it affects them. And it's been apparent here at this convention that the people that comments about this island or that one are because they're interested in their particular area. And that's human nature, no problem. But we had to, one way or another, we had to get a control of the program. Definition: island, located in the world's oceans, separated by a minimum 200 meters, and that is as firm as we can make it, of sea from the nearest continent at low tide, shown and named on a recognized official map or marine chart. That was really prior to Google Earth, and Google Earth has been a huge help to us, but it does mean that some smaller ones which weren't on a recognized map have come into play. Not in a largely enclosed bay, estuary or river, and above water at all times, not in an ice shelf. Well, these are the categories. Officially recognized island group like the Canaries, and you know, the Shiants, or groups which are shown on our reference atlas. Initially, we used a reference atlas, the Times Atlas, and of course, the scale of the maps for Europe and North America are different from the scale of the maps for Kamcha and the Pacific, and so on. So the result was that there was a tendency for an imbalance, and that we were including little groups which were shown on maps for Europe, but not little groups which were shown off other continents. So we recognized that there was an imbalance, and this review exercise, has taken account of that. We have tried to discourage Europe, not entirely successfully. There's one European on the list. Could be activated next week, actually, if someone was really interested in acting fast. Remote island group. Previously we said 100 miles, and then we found that that was the only distance measured in miles where all the others were in kilometers. It was ridiculous. So to clear that anomaly away, we changed the remote island group from 100 miles to 150 kilometers. 150 kilometers are 94 miles, and of course there are some islands which are separated by over 94 miles but less than 100 miles. It happens, and there's one on the list today on that. But there are others coming up. Unofficial island group, these are basically, as I said, the pressures were for inclusion of islands along the coastlines, some very small islands and so on, but they wanted, there was a pressure that they be included. And in the UK, of course, we have Lundy Island, we have the Isle of Wight, we have the Farne Islands, and Holy Island, and so on. Island DXCC entity, this is where the political side comes into it. If there is a change of DXCC status, then we will take account of that for IOTA. Large island, of course, Jeff had this, Sri Lanka and Corsica and Crete and so on. And for the very large islands, we had more than one coastal group. There is a degree, and I have to admit to this, there is a degree of subjectivity in this. You can't do this exercise without actually having to make a judgment, and that is how it went. And some very large islands like Greenland and Papua and New Guinea and so on do have more than one coastal island. But for split sovereignty islands, which is the next one, split sovereignty, there are a limited number of these in the world, and of course we're standing on one at the moment. And we do have coastal islands for each of the constituent parts. Now that is something that some of you who kind of said, well, you could have done it in a different way. Yes, you could have done it in a different way. But 20 years ago, 30 years ago, this seemed a sensible way of doing it. Other single island is added just to mop up anything. These are some of the basic rules I'm sure you're familiar with. Applicants must make all contacts personally. Same DXCC country. Yes, 1945. It's 73 years ago. Yes, purely coincidental. The island name must be printed on any QSL card submitted, although handwritten ones are accepted for contacts before that date. Reactions, yes. Nervousness in the community. What are they going to do? How's it going to affect us? Should we put more pressure on Roger to include this or not to do that, and so on? That's what happened. Every ardent champion of an island wants his island to be given a separate number. It's special pleading of one sort or another. Requests for the program to be extended to underwater islands. And the view was, Roger, don't worry about how we're going to operate from underwater islands. Leave it to us. We will do it. We'll put the antennas up. I'm not quite sure how, but you will put the antennas up. And particularly over the west coast, a lot of these volcanic islands have an edge to them. They're not like sandbanks, but they have an edge to them where the ecology goes down to that edge, and then there's just sea thereafter. So you can define. I have to say that this proposal came from a W6. You may be able to guess he's very well known. He's done some very big operations. He has his own company. Yes, right, here we come. Golly, golly, golly. Yes, would you believe it? Attempts were made at the beginning to wrench the program from the RSGB. And there were more than one, or there was one fairly large one, but it was a worry because we didn't have that kind of control that we have today. We built that control over the years. And the operation started on 14260. There was a regular net there, and I know how much you all hate nets and so on, but it became, when you've only got 100 or so people and an island comes up on the frequency, you can actually run the net and say, well, come on and do it that way. You can't do it now, and that's perfectly right. The purpose of the net actually was not only the occasional island station which came up, but actually to give the latest island news out. You didn't have internet. You'd have to wait for a week for some of the information news coming out, and there may be an operation coming up the following day or even on that day. Nets became less popular, died out, and as did the practice of issuing the IOTA numbers over the air. Now I'm going to say something about that because you all think, I'm sure you all think, this is the way that Roger gets his group. At that time, there were maybe 100 or 200 groups never been activated. And there was, as I said, we had a lack of the firm control we have now, and you could never be sure that someone did not appear and say, I'm on that one, and we had no prior warning or news about it, had no idea whether he was there, and the result was it caused some problems. The easiest way was to give the number over the air, and that's until we got QRM'd out. That was the way, in fact, that we did it. But it wasn't a personal satisfaction way. I didn't really like doing it. The positives. The 425DX news bulletins started in Italy, and they've done a fantastic job ever since, both for Italian and English readers. The program developed into the second most popular activity program after DXCC, with heightened levels of activity on the bands. Now, some people have called it the IOTA schemes or whatever. It's the IOTA activity program. What comes from it is activity, rather than anything else, or awards or whatever. Yes, we issue awards, but it's the activity generated. If you didn't have IOTA, what would some of the bands look like? They would be dead during the sunspot minimum, certainly. And of course, some of the activity is from very rare DX. And there was a general acceptance that much as some like it and some didn't like it, it was here to stay. Do you want to all leave now? Right. We didn't get the first one. We got a resume. Number of groups is 1124. Provisionally numbered 42. That's a subtotal of 1166. There are unnumbered groups of 33, most of which are in Antarctica. And the two together, it then adds up to 1199 with a policy cap of 1200 and the implications of that policy cap. If we increase, and we are increasing, the number of ones with numbers, we will have to reduce the unnumbered ones. Some of those in Antarctica will go. Who is going to take a yacht round the coast of Antarctica? And I mean, it's just not conceivable. It's not going to happen, I think. There may be one or two or whatever, but it's not going to happen in a big way. The current top score is 1120. The first one. Now, who has heard of Caja? No. It's one for Marty. It's a split Finnish-Swedish island. And the line goes straight the way through it. It's right up the top of the Gulf of Bothnia. And 1809, there was an agreement between the Swedes and the Finns over the islands. and there was Caja on one side and Inari on the other side, and sea in between. Yes, and the result was the land rose in the middle and joined the two together. So we have an island very similar to Market Reef. It's right up the very top. Bodo, it's right up the very top of Finland. When are you going?
Tomorrow morning.
No known previous activity. And I gather from talking to our Swedish friend who's here this weekend, you don't go up there in November, December. That's it. Sweden, Finland. Right, next one. Morane Atoll in Fox Ocean Land. It's a remote island group. It's between 94 and it's more than 94 and less than 100 miles, and it clearly counts. It was an outlier, very much an outlier of one of the existing groups, and it's 153 kilometers from Maria Est, and again there've been no previous amateur radio activity. I think it's about you'll hear more about it actually, maybe even today. You may hear more about that one. It's not that large, but it's a totally enclosed lagoon. Now, we've been asked for quite a long time about Puerto Rico and the coastal islands there. You've got coastal islands actually on both sides, so if you take the distance across that, it's quite a large area. And Puerto Rico, in fact, is very similar to Corsica, and therefore we will be giving a coastal island group to that. And you can do that pretty easily because there's airfields on some of the islands. And there had been some previous activity, three times from that one, I don't know how you pronounce it, and one each from Culebra and Mona. This is an Alaskan group, and it's a long way from the existing island in that group. And so we're going to split that one. As I say, it's at least 250 kilometers away. They are in different administrative counties, and for North America we have been using the county structure to define coastal islands. Again, no known previous amateur radio activity. It's, I knew I brought something. It's those islands there, and that one. There is some interest in going there. I don't know when, probably next year now, but there has been some interest is going there. Well, none of you will know that island. It involves a splitting of a very large box where there's got one island at the very north and another island very south, and it's 460 kilometers away, and they've been asking for that to be given a separate number, and I can't see a reason for saying no. There is another little island group there fairly close by, and we did split one of the other large coordinate boxes in the general area up there. No known previous amateur radio activity.
So who's asking to have it split? Locals or?
They will be of interest to Russian amateurs going there. They will activate them, yes. It's, again, that one, it's quite a large island, and that one, both of those count. Now, yes, this was actually quite a difficult one to decide. The problem is that the Aleutian Islands, KL7, there are a large number of groups. There are 7 groups all the way along the Aleutian Islands. The Hawaiian mini island chain, which goes from the main Hawaiian Islands, is also very long indeed. And again, there are quite a few groups, because actually they do all exceed the minimum distance requirement for a remote island. And the point was saying, look, with those 2 groups, you've got something like 19, I think that's the figure, island, no, probably less than that, 15 island groups for those of separate island numbers for those islands. And the Kuril Islands, you've just got 1 covering pretty well from the coast of Japan right the way up to Kamchatka. We did find, and it was quite difficult, we did find references on Google to the North Group and the South Group. And on the basis of that, we feel that we could split the the Kuril Islands. And we have split them at that point. So that, yes, at that point. At that point, and that point, and that point, there are some very deep channels going through, very deep channels, which gives us some guide as to how to do it. But we have split it to that. Forget those red things. This was the map we got off Google. But that one is the existing Asia 25. Most activity has been from those islands down there. And this one, there has been activity from Paramoushire. There has been some activity there, but not so very much. So that is one which will probably come up, I would think, within months. So there we are. And if you want more information, this is where you need to go. I have got copies of a listing of the new ones, which I'll have on the stand, which if you want to have a copy of that, you can. I've got a number of copies there. And if you want at the same time to buy an IOTA directory, you can of course do that. We will have a few IOTA directories there. So I'm sure we've got about 5 minutes actually for questions. Who's got any questions? Now I have to preface all this. Millions of islands, corral them into 1,200 groups. Can you do it in a different way, or have we missed out an opportunity? If you've given serious thought, you better volunteer to come onto the management committee.
Why is the take-up in the UK so low?
Yes, why is the take-up in the UK so low? I haven't got the answer to that. It's, but 90% of the people in the program are, in fact, overseas. 90% of the sales of the IOTA directory have been overseas.
The annual report,
Yes, yes,
the number of UK stations is very low.
yes, yes. I don't know.
I chase DXCC, but if islands come up, I'm always keen to work with them. I don't actually follow the program.
With the QSO matching system, which we now have with the help and assistance of Clublog, there have been a lot of new applications. 100% QSO matches. All they need is press a few buttons and they've got an application in. Obviously, the difficult one was Antarctica, but Caesar V3LYC has done an enormous job in cataloguing operations, mainly since the beginning of 2016, but he has gone back quite a lot as a result, and there are thousands now of operations which have a beginning date and a final date, and those are listed, and if you've got a contact, you put your log onto Clublog and you will get, if you get a match, and people have been, I think, 300 or 400 a score of that kind of level purely by Clublog matches, and we're thankful to Club Log, and to Alan here, who is a representative and does an enormous amount of work for Club Log. So any other questions? Yes, John.
Off topic, but you mentioned this couple of matches. Why is it that I never find any matches? I know my log's on there, I know the X station or whatever it is, the IOTA station is on there, but it tells me there are no matches.
I don't know. I mean, you should have got, with your log, you should have got hundreds of them.
Even, does it matter whether you have previously...
If you've already claimed them with a card.
I haven't claimed them with a card, but in some cases I have put in the fact that it's pending or whatever the phrase is.
Yes.
And I wonder if that inhibits the matching process.
If you've got it pending as a QSL card, I'm not sure. I don't think you will get a match. And I have to mention that Charles here is a very great help to the management team. He's our awards manager, and at the same time he deals with a lot of the inquiries which come through. In fact, the majority of the inquiries which come through. And
Just wait a few more seconds. I understand that, that's fine. But I obviously don't put it in as pending until I have received the QSL.
yes.
And yet I still don't get matching.
Well, if you've got it as pending as a QSL, I don't think the QSO matching will override it.
Club Log will match it, but the IOTA software looks to see if you've already got it, either accepted or pending.
Yes, yes.
Sorry, I maybe didn't say it very clearly. I don't put it in as a pending QSO until I've got the card.
Yes.
So why don't I get the matches before that?
I don't know the answer. Do you know?
I'll speak to you later, John.
It could be that when a log is uploaded, there's a 30-day grace period between when the
well,
matching
that,
starts. Some people can also extend that to 6 months, is it?
Yes, they may not. Some operations will not want to allow matching for 6 months or
Yes.
whatever period they want.
Because
in fact,
as the teams, some of these expeditions cost quite a lot of money. You see in the Russian Robinson Club that go way up into the Arctic, and it costs them a lot of money to do these expeditions. And as soon as you upload a log and match, bang, there's your money gone for QSL requests. So that's one issue. There's
Many reasons, John. Yeah.
there's also other reasons where they upload the log as RA0C _ Asia blah blah blah. That's another reason, because obviously it's not going to match unless you've done the same with your log. So there's other logging parameters that are going to stop that matching, which is unfortunate. So it's all things that we need to look at, and I think Club Log are looking at in the future.
can we, John? I think you and Charles probably need to get together on how this is going to work for you. But you should be. There is this 30-day. I have to give an explanation of the 30-day. Yes, the 30-day one. We have to have a period after the operation, just in case there are any problems. So we immediately, Caesar normally, or his team, Bob, K3EST, will get in touch with the operator and ask for answers to certain questions and so on, and to give validation and so on. We need to have that because, although, believe it or not, there are very, very few instances of irregular practice in the IOTA program. Far fewer than maybe thought about, but there is very few, because we do check on these operations, and we get reliable and confirmation that they did take place. Right, I think my time is up, isn't it?
It is, Roger. Thank you very much indeed. I think we should all thank Roger, not just for his presentation this morning, but for his 73 years running 30 years running the program.
Can I just say that I am mortal, and therefore there is a point where I will not be able to continue running the program. It will have to move on, and so on. So I don't know how many more times. So long as I'm fit, you'll be able to see me here. But there will come a time. It's been my life, and it's been Jill's life as well, and she has been. Can we have a vote of thanks for Jill?